Alright folks, so I got about a 2 minute wait here, so I thought I might review my folks just for the folks at home who probably are not super familiar with my team. I'll probably just paste the link here. I'm not going to bother with the screen share. I know there's been some kind of curiosity or interest, I suppose. I'm just going to remove all the embeds here. So we'll just kind of get started. I know probably there's no one here, so I'm just going to sit and talk to myself, but I'm actually very experienced at talking to myself, so not necessarily a ginormously big deal. So the leader of my team is Venus. She has debuffs on every ability. She's got a double poison, weaken, decreased defense, and this is an HP burn. Her other ability, it doesn't get used. I don't have Cupidus. I would never use this ability anyway because it's kind of garbage, but whatever. This is Martyr. She has decreased defense on her A1. She's got increased defense and counterattack on her A2. And she has Provoke, which is useless against the clan boss, and decrease attack for 2 turns. She also has the proper masteries to make everything last a little longer, and then she gets turn meter when stuff starts falling off. So more turns means more turn meter means more buffs, so it's kind of like a cycle. This is Stagnite. He is my redundant attack down. Because I have attack down on abilities, I need to have kind of 2 of them to make sure I have up all the time. It also does decrease defense, and then his A1 is just an A1. The decreased speed doesn't happen, and nobody cares about it. Banshee, everybody should be familiar with. She puts her A3 up, which does nothing except damage and puts a debuff, and then she hits the crap out of people. Her A2 will give you turn meter. And then, of course, everybody knows who Apothecary is. He has a 2-turn heal and a 3-turn increase speed by 30% for 2 turns, and then he has lasting gifts, so that sometimes goes all the way up to 3 turns. He is unusually fast. Actually, he has somewhere in the ballpark of 260 speed, 263. But that's my son. He's saying hi. And so he actually will lap the Nightmare Clan boss between his turn meter buffs and other things. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. So probably by now we are good to go to start our clan boss run. We have a key, and we are still in Void, which is A+. So, son. Good boy. Hold on 1 second, son. I need to get this started. Alright, so you can see I have this arranged this specific way so that Void to Void, she tends to try to stun the leader as long as the leader is type neutrality and there's not any debuffs that could screw things up. So I'm going to start this before time runs out, and then I'm going to have to deal with my son real fast, but it's okay. If you start the clan boss on Void and then he loses health, he will not switch affinities mid-run for you. Give me 1 second. Okay. Alright, so I had to put my son in the other room. He's not a very patient type person. So we're going to do this one totally from the start, all manual. We don't switch to auto at any point. That is a thing that some folks do. I don't do it. There's no point. Until my folks are like basically all dead and nothing I do matters. So part of what you need to keep in mind, obviously, this run is this is a non-traditional build for the clan boss. Typically speaking, people use either like a completely zoomy comp or they use a completely counterattack comp. I do kind of a middle ground. I do them both, which sometimes has ups and sometimes has down. So the first thing you do is get that turn meter rolling. You can see this puts a lot of folks already on the turn because I'm faster than the clan boss on everybody, obviously, but I'm significantly faster on some folks. I want to get all my debuffs up as soon as possible here, and then I take counterattack. This counterattack, I'll get full rotation on almost everybody. So the typical advantage to a counterattack is you're not really going to live much longer in terms of turn meter, because as his damage ramps up, you stop really being able to effectively do anything to increase your effective health. So having your decreased defense buff up and having a counterattack means that you get 2 attacks for every turn that you take, basically, for the first 2 turns of every 3-turn cycle. So you're going to kind of add those up, and then you're getting 5 attacks in a 3-turn cycle, which is better than you can normally do, or better than most folks can do. So you can see here that even though the boss is about to do an AoE, I've already taken enough turns, like this person's already taken 2 turns since I put the buff up, that it doesn't help me at all to leave it up. So I'm just going to start taking more turns. The important part is going to be that I don't need to apply the poison sensitivity, and I already have max debuffs. So the options that I have at this point with these 2 characters is going to be to cast buffs that are just like updating previously existing buffs, or to try to use skills to kind of get more damage. Obviously, you can see I can't do any more damage with my skills because this debuff bar is full, and this does basically no damage. You saw over here the whatever it's called, the thing that makes you get reduced cooldowns popped up, which doesn't matter on manual because ultimately you're not going to change what turns you use that particular skill on, but it's cute. So I'm going to get 2 turns here, or get 2 counterattacks here essentially. Get 2 attacks here, it'll be okay. You can see, so I'm trying to make sure that I have the A2 up all the time. That gives the weaken, which increases your, what's it called? Your Giant Slayer or War Master proc. So what I do need to do, because this is a manual run and I have non-redundant, I have redundant attack down, but I don't have attack down on my A1, I need to always be tracking this buff. The poison sensitivity buff is somewhat less important because I just don't really care about it all that much. And these folks running their counterattack down doesn't really matter because they weren't going to counterattack anyway. This boss is about to use his single target stun ability, likely on Venus. So you can see the debuff bar is full. Typically I would like to incorporate this HP burn. It does 75,000 damage per turn, but it's not possible when the debuff bar is full. And then, of course, you know she's about to get stunned, so she is not going to cast it on this turn cycle. You can see that I have no bar, but the boss is like 40%, and I know that this person is going to lap the boss, so I can take a turn here dealing damage with another ability, because I'm pretty sure that I will, in fact, lap the clan boss this turn. Turns out I didn't, but not the end of the world. And now I'll need to run around again, waiting for another set of turn cycles to pass through to get my clan boss, my counterattack resynced up to the clan boss. So what I'm trying to do here is get as many poisons up as I can. There we go. So this was the turn where I lapped. I thought I was going to lap the previous turn. So this does 2 poisons, a 50% chance of each, and this does just the 1 HP burn, but it does more damage individually. So I'm going to try to get the HP burn up. It didn't work. That's a little garbage. You can see I only missed out on 1 poison here. So I should try to have 5, which is perfectly fine. And we're just going to kind of keep running through these. Now we're on the stun turn, but everybody has the counterattack buff up. So we're just going to try to cycle through the turns as fast as possible. There's no benefit to not pushing through turns on the stun turn as fast as possible. For one thing, it's entirely possible that this person will lap the clan boss all by herself naturally now, but the other thing is that it just takes everybody's stuff off of cooldown. So I have 2 turns on that. So by the time that it runs back around, it will be okay. So she's not going to naturally lap the clan boss. I would need a little bit more speed than that. But I could use this, and then these folks would take turns. I don't want them to take turns because they have the counterattack up, so I'm going to choose not to use that ability. She's going to refill, Banshee's going to refill the bar here, and you can see we know that her A3 is off cooldown now. We have counterattack up, so we don't want to use our turn meter at this time if we don't have to. and we're just going to do what we can to make sure that we're getting our turns. You can see that this 50% meter sometimes doesn't actually put a poison up, which I guess is common for people who have Steel Skull. They're probably way more familiar with this. So here's kind of one of the fundamental issues with the comp. You can see I don't have poison sensitivity, but I do have 5, 6, 7, 8. So if this triggers twice, I won't have space for the poison sensitivity debuff. Luckily it didn't, but it is something that you do need to be cognizant of if you can help it, is just to keep a space for these critical buffs. So there's essentially 4 critical buffs, and then everything else is just supposed to be poisons if possible, or HP burn. Yes, Torms, I am aware that that is theoretically what would be going on, except that I'm specifically running this comp in such a way as to take extra turns, a plurality of extra turns over the course of the game that results in more damage. I have been playing this game for more than a little while. Yeah. So, I mean, in theory, I understand conceptually that if you were getting like full CA, you get 5 to 3, and I kind of explained that in the beginning of this. You probably weren't listening yet. Is that if you have counterattack and you speed tune, you get five attacks in the span of the boss's 3-turn cycle. Oh, I was talking and I fucked it up. You get 5 attack in the span of the boss's 3-turn cycle. Yeah, you can't have. So if you are going to speed tune, you do need to drop everything that could increase your meters or reduce your cooldowns unexpectedly. So that would include the random cooldown mastery, and it also would include when your buffs fall off and your debuffs fall off, there's a chance that you get 10% speed. So you want to avoid all of those things. In order to properly speed tune a team. I do not do that for a variety of reasons, and probably the most important of which is if you lock yourself to that counterattack cycle, critical buffs will fall off. So, for instance, if you are essentially like 1-to-1ing the boss's turn, and Alright, so what Twums is saying is, isn't counterattack better because you get more attacks in? Yes, in theory, it would be great if you just were able to perfectly time everything and you didn't lose out on any attacks and nothing else mattered. The reality is, for some heroes, especially Frozen Banshee, there's no way for you to keep up this poison sensitivity debuff with 100% accuracy if you do not lap the boss occasionally. So you could theoretically set it up so that you're 4 to 3 with the boss, with your Frozen Banshee taking more turns. So Twomes, the theory of what you're discussing is sound, right? So I'm not arguing that speed tuning isn't a very valuable tool for letting people cut turns. The primary difference is that I've been doing this for more than a month, and I just always lose damage if I'm speed tuned compared to when I'm just manually taking all of my turn. Generally speaking, because I'm lapping the boss on multiple characters, I wind up getting more damage than just getting an A1 out of them, and I have better buff and debuff uptime. So that's kind of the short answer. The mathematics of it, I don't necessarily know how to articulate, but I do know that I spent a week speed tuned, and then I've spent all this other time not speed tuned, and I definitely get more damage this way overall compared to doing it the traditional way. Believe me, it would be significantly easier for me to let everything run on auto and let me like sleep or eat or do whatever the hell people do when they don't have to manually hit the clan boss for 13 minutes every day. But I just do not seem to quite have that luxury. The luxury of just letting it run on auto. It's just less damage empirically over time. So I obviously, at the end of the day, I do what works more so than anything else. just resists both of my poisons? Wow, that's impressive. I mean, theoretically, what you're the thing is like, oh well, you're missing counterattacks by not having it up all the time, which I agree with completely. But I also get to have debuffs up on the boss all the time, which in a counterattack comp you do miss. There's no way around the fact that you just can't have, for some abilities you just can't have them up all the time. So like this time I actually used my Martyr skill because I was scared that my Banshee was going to die, and she does most of the damage on my team. But so I mean, like, even even in a theoretical sense, you so I fucked that up. That whole cycle is just gone basically, because there's no way that I'm going to get the counterattack buff up in time. And then of course the next turn is a stun turn, so it's not going to be relevant. But what was I saying? Oh, so obviously you know that Banshee's ability has a 3-turn cooldown. So if you're taking turns at the same time, as the boss is, if your poison sensitivity isn't extended, you will not have it up for 3 turns. So the only way to get around that is to take more turns, or just admit that you sometimes, occasionally, won't have the buff up all the time. Proportionately, I do about 75,000 damage. Like, once the comp gets rolling, I do about 75,000 damage every turn. Sorry, I'm doing some math in my head. So I fucked up here. Yeah, so I fucked up here. That killed my Venus. It turns out that actually talking and doing this is much more difficult than I recollected. But you can see basically if I'm going to live probably about 3 more turns here, and I want to get this up. These are actually 2 of my most devastatingly bad runs in a while. Yeah, so I'll live 2 more turns. Luckily, I very rarely die out of the blue. So now I'm just using skills because I need to get squeezed in some more damage. So Venus is no longer around, so I could fill the bar up a little higher. Okay, so I'm definitely going to be dead in a couple turns. So you can see that I've dealt 20,000 damage in, 20,000 damage in 27 turns. So I'm doing about 750,000 damage per turn, which is probably better than most of the folks that you're sitting there looking at. And my gear is like actually terrible. So you notice that my apothecary died. So basically I'm kind of de facto speed tuned now, except for the meter increases and decreases that I'll get from buffs falling off or debuffs falling off. So at this point, like, I could theoretically put the run on auto, because there's no real benefit after this point to trying to get an extremely small amount of turn meter every other turn compared to how much damage I'm going to get, because this is 6, 8, 9, so I can fill my bar with just her right now, and she's probably going to die. Yeah, so she dies right here because the attack fell off. And at this point, I just have my 2 tankiest folks. This is a stun turn, so counterattack doesn't matter. I was hoping the stun would go on him, then I get an extra 2 or 3 turns. But you can see that it's basically, with my Banshee dying, I lost damage, obviously. So you can see that in 31 turns, I did 22,000 damage, which is enough to solidly 2-key without much concern. 22 divided by 22 divided by 32. Yeah, so it's like 70,000. So the run averages out to about 70,000 damage every turn. I think I typically average about 75 to 750 essentially thousand damage every turn. But this is enough to pretty solidly 2-key with extremely mediocre gear in my perspective. Um, with very few. I mean, this Venus could be Bulwark, and this comp would still work just as well. Actually, it might even work better because I wouldn't have to worry about debuffs dropping off as much. I mean, that's actually, you can see I used to have her. But you can see, if you looked at the gear on my folks, greens and blues with some epics, almost no legendaries. This one happens to be legendary, but I've been playing for a fairly long time. Same thing, this one, literally one legendary item, still wearing a green chest because I just literally can't replace this with another lifesteal chest. Yeah, just really unlucky, I guess. I suppose that there is a question of whether or not at some point it becomes worth it to wear an HP chest over a defense chest, but her damage also does kind of scale off of defense, so I do like to leave it there. You can see, I think he's in really good gear comparatively, but look, even he's still got some greens on. And of course, at the end of the day, this is just like missing stats. Like, this isn't even particularly good. It has 9 speed as its only relevant stat. Same thing for this one. If you looked at the gear, this one literally has 11% HP, 4% speed. Almost everything else is irrelevant. This one doesn't have, like, my Great Hall's really terrible. But I can solidly 2-key the clan boss for Nightmare. I could probably even do it on, yeah, I don't have any more keys. I can pretty solidly do it on Nightmare. I might even be able to auto it at some point. I'm not really sure. I don't check the auto very much. Eventually, like Chom's was saying, you're missing turns. Like, well, it's true, but Apothecary is my only really good healer. This is a replacement that I did try when I was speed tuning, but I wasn't quite able to get the stats up there. You can see that only got barely under 3,000 defense, and you can see obviously this guy is also barely under 3,000 defense, but I tried him for about a week with a full speed tune team, and it was significantly less damage, probably like 5 million less damage, so it wasn't really worth it. I will try Gerbtuck on my team and retry a speed tune comp for multiple reasons. I don't think that this poison damage is going to be a concern, and the fact that this goes down to a 2-turn cooldown is going to be great because I do know who my stun target is about 99% of the time. So it's really just a question of getting the team to cooperate. But I do feel like the counterattack concept has some really fundamental issues, particularly if you use Frozen Banshee as your poisoner. If you had somebody else you'd like to use as a poisoner, I know that Occult Brawler is extremely good. He would be, I think he's a Skinwalker, yeah. He would be probably significantly better. No, he's an Ogren, I'm sorry. Significantly better in a straight counterattack comp because his A2 puts the poisons without needing a debuff up. And then he does do a self-heal, if I recall correctly, yeah, so he heals. Or the other one is Yaga the Unsatiable. Who is, I thought it was a Lizard Man. No, he's a Skinwalker too. That's why I was over here. So Yaga over here. He has poison on his A1, and then he's got a poison on his A2. He's got a poison on his he's got a poison on his A1. He's poison on his A2. 2 poisons on his A2, basically. So, the problem with these folks in counterattack comp, obviously, is that they will put out more consistent poisons, but they will not be able to do the same damage. Basically, they don't fill the bar themselves. Given that I have Venus, there's definitely a question on whether or not I should be no longer using Banshee as my primary poisoner. Because Venus also puts up some number of poisons, and if you look at the damage breakdown from the last run, you'll indicate that Banshee did like, I don't know, 7 or 8 million, and then Venus did like 5. If Venus wasn't in the comp putting poisons up, she would just do the full like 11. So I definitely certainly think that that's an issue that is it's an aspect of the game definitely worth exploring if I ever got a cult brawler to potentially replace Banshee or put her on a different spot. The only other thing, of course, is losing out on 12.5% damage. You know, 12.5 thousand damage every tick is quite a lot. But certainly it would be something worth exploring if I was in a position where I kind of had as many sixes as I wanted and enough books to do whatever the hell I wanted to do, like content creators. But overall, the reality is my folks aren't particularly well geared, but I can still two key the boss. What I will do today, probably, which I avoid doing under normal circumstances, I will hit the Ultra Nightmare boss a few times, and I'll probably record those. The Ultra Nightmare boss, my apothecary shouldn't lap him, which does fundamentally change kind of the way that the comp can play, because he only has 163 or 263, and that boss has 190 speed, so you would need to get somewhere up in the ballpark of like 300 speed, 360 speed to actually lap that boss. And even with 30% on 260, you're still not quite there. I did the math at some point to figure out how fast you need to be to actually lap the Nightmare Clan boss, but it's extremely high. So even with a speed buff, it's not really terribly attainable. And at that point, you really should be on a nuking comp at that point, as opposed to like a poisoning one. So anyway, that was I think 22 was the second run, so that wasn't terrible. It's about 2 million more than the earlier run that I did today. And I think that one was a little bit more representative, all things considered. Right? Yeah. So I had one for 20, one for 22. So 22 is enough to solidly two key this. Actually, over by about 3 million. And you know, you can tell kind of. I think we talked about this earlier. Packle has a bunch of really good stuff, and you can see just significantly less damage overall, about 3 million. So as it adds up over time, these extra little points that I'm getting here and there is enough that it's worth it for me to spend all this time, because obviously it is a frustration for me to have to sit here for 13 minutes more. This is more because I was talking, but for about 13 minutes or more sitting here hitting the clan boss every morning, I would happily take that half hour back if it was attainable or reasonable, but it's not. So ultimately, that's kind of how this works when you're making the decisions in the comp. You just need to get a good feel for how the comp actually plays and how your turn meters interact with the boss's turn meter, essentially. The other benefit is that you can run characters who are way faster than the speed tune, and that is really useful if your characters are going to be used in other places. So, my martyr, I have her at the minimum speed almost possible, but also I use her in a lot of other places, and the fact that she's slow kind of sucks compared to, I think I have him pretty close to speed, yeah. So like 180 or so, I have the two of these guys at. They're both at 185, and of course this one, she's real fast, she's 210. And then of course I have my apothecary, who is at 263. So what I give up in survivability by keeping the decreased debuff on them, I feel like at least I get back in damage, because I have tried this comp speed tuned, and the exact same people, basically just with less speed. And the reality was I was just doing less damage. I had to 3-key the Nightmare boss. So what I'll try to do is I'll get this up on YouTube so that folks can review it whenever they want to. If you have anything that is not, well, if you have any criticism that isn't like, hey, you should speed tune because it's better, please feel free to share it with me in the Discord, or, I guess you could probably leave a comment. I don't really check those. Actually, I'm not really sure how the comment system works because nobody ever comments on my videos. But this is kind of a basic, kind of rundown of how the comp is and what it works and why it works. And pretty much fundamentally it works because it's significantly better to have 25% damage on what's essentially half of your damage. So for this comp, the damage that you're dealing comes exclusively from War Master and Giant Slayer and from poison. And obviously getting 25% more poison is pretty good. As long as you have more than 4 poisons, it's worth its spot. And then once you have 6 poisons, obviously it's worth 50% extra damage. So, pretty valuable overall. Preferable to get HP Bird if possible, but she doesn't always hit it, which is super annoying. And she can't maintain it herself. I'd have to get her more speed. But that's pretty much it.